Maybe not a surprise after all. These banks, for the most part, and I'm talking about the biggest Wall Street banks, were far more optimistic about the health of their balance sheets in a highly stressed environment. We're talking about, 50% drop in stock prices, 20% drop in home prices, 12% unemployment. That's the scenario.
12, wait, stop at 12%
That's
unemployment?
the scenario.
That would be stressful. Michelle Meyer just fell off her seat.
Tested the balance sheets. The banks thought that they would come out doing much better than they actually did, and that raises some questions about whether the Fed will give them the permission to return as much capital to shareholders as they had intended.
This morning, driving in because he's richer than you and me, is James Dimon saying he hates the Fed? Does Jamie Dimon hate the Fed this morning?
Yeah, he might. He might, because the Fed takes a view of J.P. Morgan's business and balance sheet that isn't quite as optimistic, perhaps, as J.P. Morgan's own internal financial analysis. And why is that important? Because the Fed applies some subjective analysis to the bank, taking a look at how it would perform under market stress, and comes up with some different conclusions than Dimon and his own
Bill
people.
Cohan, Charles Calamirez of Columbia sat in that chair yesterday and said, this is a bunch of baloney, Basel's baloney. They got to be like UBS and Credit Suisse and just put more capital on the book. Is that where we're heading?
Well, I think clearly more capital. Look, there's a lot of capital in these banks already, okay? And so the bankers don't like it because they can't get the return on the capital. I mean, once upon a time, Goldman Sachs had a 70% ROE. They had very little capital and a lot of earnings. Now, they're lucky if they get to 10 anymore. So we're in a very different environment. These banks feel like they've got plenty of capital, maybe too much capital. The question is not, I don't think the question is capital. To me, I hate to be a broken record here, but the question is the incentives and what people are rewarded to do, and they are still rewarded to take risks with other people's money.
But the reason people like Charlie Calamirez want the banks to have more capital is because they don't trust the banks to align the incentives the right way. So the only way to fight it, is by forcing them to hold more capital.
And I think that's
create a bigger cushion in the case of stupid behavior.
And I think that's what the Fed stress tests are all about.
You know what, Tom? We are going to get more capital. If Dan Tarullo gets his way, each of these banks is going to have to warehouse capital by country, which means that the capital will be less flexible and they're going to have more of it.
Okay, Tarullo, I thought, was very responsible in his comments, a governor of the Fed, not a monetary economist type, the guy in bank regulation. Here's the question of the moment. You say there'll be more capital. Where does it come from? Share dilution?
Retained earnings.
They're going to earn.
Banks are making money. They just have to give. They just have to give less of it back.
Yeah, they can do all. They can. Plenty of debt is available to these.
But they don't need to raise capital.
They don't need to raise capital.
They don't need to raise it.
Pay their employees less.
They could pay their employees less.
That just generates more retained earnings.
And by the way, that is what they're doing.
No, but I'm lost.
They're cutting employees.
But stop. If they take this out of retained earnings, pull it in, granted it sits like a lead brick on the balance sheet.
Like it.
If it's a one-off, economically it's a one-off sunk cost, why are they so upset about building up a rainy day account? We all have to do that at this table.
Because most of their wealth comes in the form of stock. And if you hold back more capital, you generate a lower return. The shares don't perform as well as you'd like them to. You end up less wealthy.
It's all about
comes down
ROE.
to how rich you are.
Right. I mean, the executives at Bear Stearns were rewarded on an ROE basis. So their incentive always was to have as little capital as possible and as high as earnings as possible. So when you're paid on an ROE basis, you don't like more capital. It's hard to get that return.
Well, thank you so much.